Bear by Harry Potter, Harry Windsor, Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, you know the one. He's all over the place at the minute. Give this book a read, give it a listen. Don't expect to be shocked by anything. He's said it all already in the interviews. It's all been all over the papers. There's no detail about the sex that he had in that field with that older woman who called him a stud and spanked his ass and left him alone. That's basically all you hear about it. It's a couple of lines. What else? He has a fight with William at one point, and I saw some woke wimp on the news at one point almost crying, saying, oh, it must have been so hurtful for him to get into that fight with his brother. And I was just left there thinking, my God, me and my brothers used to fight all the damn time. I mean, we get on brilliantly, but, you know, boys will occasionally fight and come to blows. Harry's been to war. He was a helicopter, you know, during wartime. By his own admittance, he's killed however many Taliban. I think he can probably cope with a bit of a scrap with his brother, you know, without getting too much PTSD from that. So let's not worry too much. But the point is, people just get a bit ridiculous about it, don't they? I just think, yes, I understand sympathy for Harry. Of course, I do. Imagine living in this weird gilded cage where you're basically in the Truman Show every single day. Doesn't matter how much money you've got, does it, and privilege, because you're used to that from birth. You can't really do anything with it that you want to do. You know, if you or I were given millions of pounds all of a sudden, we'd go out and buy the things that we'd always wanted, you know, fantastic cars and yachts and holidays and things that we can't normally afford. It'd be really exciting, but for them, they've always had it, and it's just been ski trips and it's been this and that, and they've been surrounded by bodyguards and whatever else. And that's something else he moans about at one point, isn't it? His security and all of that. So, but you know, I'm not going to give too many spoilers in this review because they've all been done already, basically. But I actually listened to the Audible version. It's read by Harry himself. He reads it quite well, to be fair to him. Why wouldn't he? He's got a good voice. It's good to be read to by him as well in some ways. So I'm not writing this book off. I didn't particularly want to read it when I first heard about it, and my wife was quite surprised. But you know what? I just wanted to be able to have a proper opinion on it rather than just kind of speculating. I'd seen the interviews and all that stuff, and, you know, but he does... What's disappointing is there is a constant thread of moaning and chip on the shoulder kind of resentment throughout the whole book, and I'm really disappointed by that. He will say something kind of positive about William or Charles, but it'll be completely underlined or ruined by the fact that he's a spare. He's always been a spare. He's always been second best, and that's always an issue for him, the way he's going on. At one point he talks about money. This is right towards the end of the book, and this actually, if I wasn't already getting annoyed by what he was saying, when he said this at the end of the book, it completely undermined anything good he had said, so I will tell you this much. He says at the end that when they were trying to sort out security because it was how many million just taken away from them once his dad had fired him and blah, blah, blah. And he does admit that actually working for your dad is a weird thing, and he can understand why people think that's really self-entitled and what have you. But he kind of explains it by saying, you know, I'd always been employed by my dad. That was just the way it was. To have the rug pulled from underneath me was really, really difficult all of a sudden to be cut off that way. So I get that, kind of sympathise with that. His security was how many million a year or something. You know, ridiculous amount, and he couldn't have that anymore, and he felt that he needed that for whatever reason, fine. But he then completely ruined everything by saying that the money he'd been left by his mummy, which I think was about 30 million, it might have been 30 million between the two of them, so 15 each, or was it 60 million between the two of them, 30 each, I'm not sure. Either way, quite a lot of money by most people's standards. He actually says, without even kind of stopping for breath or laughing or anything, he actually says it quite seriously. We didn't want to touch the money that mummy left us because we saw that as our children's. And I just thought, okay, you genuinely think people are going to kind of sympathise with that, don't you? That's really honourable that you want to leave your inheritance to your kids. I get that. But if you've got, whether it's 15, 30 million in the bank, I'm sure Meg has got her own amount as well, so you've probably got a good few million, you're telling us that you don't want to have to use any of that. Could you not just, if you're really concerned about your kids, could you not just put like a few million away for them from, you know, somewhere, and then dig into the rest of it maybe until you're out of trouble? Would that be too much to ask? It annoys me. I've known people who have had like 50, 100 grand put away, and they act like they're skint because that's their life savings and they don't want to dip into it and things have gone bad. But sometimes savings need to be used to sort of back you up and as a bit of an emergency fund. He's talking millions, and that just completely undermined the whole thing for me. So anyone who follows this channel fairly regularly will know that I love reading books, I love listening to books, I love personal development. I've been reading quite seriously now for about 4 years, I suppose. I'm probably doing reviews for about 3.5, 4 years. I've been reading for a lot longer than that. I've been reading most of my life, but I really kind of took off with my reading about 4 years ago. Or was it a bit longer than that, actually? My daughter's nearly 6, so it's kind of around the time my daughter was born, so maybe it's a bit longer than that. But anyway, I just decided I really wanted to develop myself, I wanted to improve my business, I wanted to improve myself spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, blah, blah, blah. I've been reading, listening. And I do these reviews as a way to give my kids in a few years' time a bit of idea about the stuff that I read and listened to and how that shaped me for better or worse, how some of my opinions, good or bad, have been formed. The books that I really recommend, the ones that are really, really worthwhile. And I have read some fantastic books by some fantastic authors over the years, but also some more trashy stuff like this that I'm reviewing today. But still, this is interesting, to be fair. There is something to be learned from this book, I think, and it did make me think about certain things. If nothing else, it makes you realise how lucky you are not to be in the public eye the whole time. And actually, that isn't really something always to aspire to, unless you're that way inclined, I suppose. But yeah, I do these reviews so my kids can look back at me, laugh at me, trying to be a YouTuber and get a bit of an idea about books and how the books that I loved as well, because I do feel really passionate about books and I hope these reviews are reasonably useful. So please keep liking and subscribing. That's always really nice. Always appreciate that. So this book, like I say, Spare by Prince Harry, it's not anything special. You're not going to be shocked by it particularly. There are some interesting bits. There are some genuinely nice bits where he's talking about the Queen Mother and his relationship with her and sharing a gin with her and stuff. I really liked that. It was nice hearing about some of the sort of breaks they went on together as a whole family and the very rare times he felt like they were properly a family. It's interesting hearing about Charles. I think he paints Charles in quite a good light, actually. He almost tries to sort of bring him down at the same time as kind of being nice about him. It's almost like, I love you, Dad, but at the same time, you're a bit of a wanker because of this and that, and you didn't do this, you didn't hug me enough, and blah, blah, blah. William, I think he paints in quite a negative light. Again, he kind of makes out that he loves him so much and he really cares about their relationship, but actually he just sees him as a competitive big brother who he's always going to be second best to, and he's clearly very resentful about that, so that's irritating. Believe me, when all this stuff started, I wanted to kind of champion Harry a little bit because I'm a similar age to his brother. But growing up, when I was really young when their mum died, and I remember my parents talking about it. It was obviously really upsetting. It was horrible. Still really sympathise with him about that. That must be hideous. Can't begin to imagine what that was like for him. And the British press have been scummy as hell and disgusting. I'm sure they continue to be in lots of ways, to be fair. I don't think they're as bad as they used to be, but I'm sure that there is still a strong element of that. I think that is horrible. But no matter what someone's been through, if you are going to moan and you're going to want to have your cake and eat it, and you're going to want to use your titles and your fame to propel yourself and make money for yourself, if you're going to be a hypocrite, basically, then you're not going to get very much support from the British public. And I speak as an English person, a British person, and I do think the royal family is important. I think we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think they bring us in lots of money. I think one of the few things this country has, to be fair, is the kind of the pomp, the ceremony, the tradition, the history, and I love all that stuff. I think it's fantastic. I've lived in London for a few years. I love going to London. I think the history and the culture is amazing. It's full of faults. It's full of racism and war and death, and we all need to take a certain amount of responsibility for that to some degree and understand that and learn about that. But being patronised by Harry about what racism is and unconscious bias and stuff is pretty irritating, to be honest, I must admit. It's almost like he's kind of 36 years old and he's just suddenly read a book and he's decided he knows what that stuff's about now, and he needs to tell the rest of us that we don't really understand, and we need to come round to that. Now that he's with someone of colour or black or whatever, however it is she wants to be referred to, whatever's the best way to refer to, I don't really care. All of a sudden he's an expert on that, and the rest of us need to learn. And I'm sure there are plenty of people in the UK who don't really understand that stuff, but you're not going to teach them or change them by patronising them like that. If you're not a self-reflective person, you're probably just going to carry on being the way you are. So yeah, we get that, Harry. Thank you for those messages. I don't personally believe that being overly politically correct all the time is good. I think it's a really bad idea, actually. I think freedom of speech is really, really important. I think once we start to disintegrate that sort of stuff and tear down statues, deny history, stop people from saying certain things that we don't like, it's a slippery slope, and I don't think it takes a hell of a lot of intelligence and education to understand that. But I'm going off on a tangent because I like doing that. But like I say, give this book a go if you want to. It's nothing amazing, but it is interesting. If you're interested in the royal family and you want to know what's going on with Harry, then give it a listen. But you won't learn much more than what he said already in the interviews and the stuff in the papers. But fair play to him, I hope him and Meghan will be together 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time. And I hope they carve out some kind of meaningful niche for themselves and they do something worthwhile. I hope they do a lot of charity work and they don't just make money for themselves. Nothing against making money whatsoever, but I just think it's more admirable, isn't it, when people kind of give back to society where they possibly can. There's only so much money you need at the end of the day, isn't there? And I think Charles, I think best of luck to Charles. I'm not sure he entirely wants his role as king necessarily. I'm sure his ego does, but I'm sure there's a part of him that just thinks I'm 70 odd years old and I'd quite like to relax now towards the end of my life, but actually I've got to do this now and I can't have an opinion on this and an opinion on that. So best of luck to him. I hope he stays as clean as the Queen did, and I hope he represents the UK in the best possible way. I have no doubt that William and Kate are probably a bit irritating, self-entitled, spoiled, because of course they are. They're hugely privileged. And I'm sure they did do some of the horrible things that Harry says in the book. Maybe they did or didn't. William won't ever be able to defend himself on that because he's not likely to come out of the book anytime soon. And that's kind of what I admire about the people in the royal family who get on with the job. They represent their country. They stay respectful of people, of themselves. They keep themselves clean. And it's that sense of duty, isn't it? And I think the ones who do that deserve to be kind of respected and to be thought of well. The ones who don't, Prince Andrew, Harry, the people who want to have their kind of cake and eat it as well, do that, that's fine, but don't do any harm at the same time. Do it, just keep it away in private. Because I'd want to be, I could imagine being like Harry if I was in that situation. I would want to go away with a beautiful woman and start a family and have a happy life in private. I wouldn't want to be bothered all the time and hassled by people. But I like to think I wouldn't also try to use that name and throw up shit and dirt in order to generate that money. I try and do it in a bit more of an honourable, respectful way. But, you know, it's very easy talking about situations that you're not in, isn't it? So let's look at it from both sides and allow it to help us think. Thank you very much. Keep liking, subscribing, and I'll be back again soon. Cheers.